Welcome back to the hood, everyone. I'm Zacharoni, and remember that rating system I tested last time? Well, after looking back at it, I thought to myself, how much do I like this game if I give it a like rating? So I'm going to try out a different rating system this time, and this one involves medals where if I like it, then I'll give it a medal that represents my enjoyment. Here's a few examples. Spiritfarer gets a gold medal for being an engaging and memorable experience, and it was also my game of 2020. Crash 4 gets a silver medal, while fun and challenging, aiming for that 100% completion does get irritating with its difficulty. And Ghost Runner gets a bronze medal, while got a fun gameplay loop, everything else is left to be desired. And then there's the other three I come up with. If it well made but not for me, it gets a Certificate of Appreciation, Retro Final Fantasy VII. If I'm mixed about the game, then it gets a Stone Medal, Ninjala. And if I have nothing nice to say about the game, then it gets a Urinal Medal, Y2K, which is basically a urinal cake attached to a piece of string that they can use on a failed project. So without further ado, please be seated, and here's what's on my completed menu so far. On December 15th, 2020, I started playing Virgil in Devil May Cry 5, and then on January 14th, 2021, I beaten all missions on Demon Hunter mode. Virgil is Dante's serious older brother who just wanted to be like Sephiroth, and we may have known how that went out exactly, death battle. But after that ending in Devil May Cry 5, I'm struggling to decide who is now the most powerful character in the series. But enough about context, let's talk about Virgil's playstyle, and before the Capcom DMC fans ask, which is the alternative word for Ninja DMC, I didn't try Virgil in both special editions of DMC 3 and 4, so this is a new experience for me with him really. And compared to the three characters in the main game, he's the quicker character but at the cost of weaker attacks. But unlike the three characters in the main game, he utilized a mechanic called the concentration gauge that required him to stay still and walk slowly to enemies to increase it, to unleash more powerful attacks that are only activated with it. So I have to play cool and patient with Virgil while trying not to get hit, otherwise the gauge will be instantly emptied from a single attack. And then there's his Devil Trigger that allows him to summon a duplicate of himself, and he can fully transform by filling a special meter up with the remaining gauge that he acquired during battle. But while I find him unique to play, given that it matches his personality, I found him quite hard to master, given that I couldn't pull off some of his most powerful attacks with this feature, and I can easily forget to slow down with him. Plus, I didn't use his World of V move that much because I need to rotate the analog stick, followed by a button press to summon V and his companions, which to my mind is difficult to pull off, just like V really. So overall, I'll give the Virgil DLC a silver medal. He may be a little too complex for me to handle in a second run, but I still enjoyed playing at him that required patience, and his final slice has an interesting twist as well, despite going through the same game again. On December 19th, 2020, I tried out the Sephiroth challenge in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and then I unlocked him and beaten hit challenge mode. If Steve from Minecraft is the most WTF character in the game, then Sephiroth is the most WTF character announcement to date, as in why TF is he in and not Gino from Super Mario RPG. See what I did there? But my big question is, how do you make a character who is declared so powerful that you balance him in a game like this? Well, that's easy. You make him a lightweight class, making him the easier character to be knocked off the stage quite easily. His standard attacks are just the tip of his handle, while his smash attacks are a really long sword, which had some good range to them. And then there are his special moves, ranging from a counter attack, a recovery attack that can be moved in any direction, orbs that can be attached to enemies and they do damage to them in a few seconds, and then there his standard special that fires a projectile that explodes when it comes into contact. And what I like is that the more you charge it up, the more lethal it becomes, but at a cost of a shorter range. So he's a good balanced character for anyone to take on, and he can become stronger when his percentage is high, making him one of the most enjoyable characters to play. And then there's his stage, Northern Cave, where it's a good representation from the main game, even though it's a spoiler, but there aren't any special hazards that are going on, like the other Final Fantasy stage, Midgar. However, my biggest head scratcher is its classic mode where, instead of facing characters, you are facing against the bosses from the main game section, with the exception of the two from World of Light. I know this represents Sephiroth as the most powerful boss in gaming history, but this feels like a boss rush mode where any character can do, really. I mean, why can't we face against a hero and villain character like Mario and Bowser, and then Link and Ganondorf, and then Samus and Wrigley, ultimately ending in a showdown with Cloud, and then Master Hand and Crazy Hand? That would have been a better classic mode for him. But despite from that, I like Sephiroth than the other 3 DLC characters that was released before him, and I give him a silver medal for that. And before you ask, I'm saving Pyre and Mithra for the next completed menu, so have patience and let me spend more time with these ladies. And not that type of spending, perverts. On December 25th, 2021, I started playing Sackboy A Big Adventure on the PS4, and then on January 20th, 2021, I beaten the final boss. When I heard that the Sumo Sheffielders were making a game starring Sackboy, I was skeptical at first, given that it looks like a Super Mario 3D World ripoff, and admittedly, it does feel a little stiff when I start playing it, but in the end, I found it to be an enjoyable game where Sackboy can be himself, and it proves it in the Tribal in Paradise level where Uptown Funk was played, and not only the environment play along with the music, but also the enemies as well. Then I was introduced with more levels that take place in a jungle and a futuristic city, and all of them look like they have been crafted by hand, which is still impressive to look at, especially on the PS4. Plus, the power-ups are enjoyable, like the returning hookshot, while the newer toys like the heat-seeking boomerang and the rocket suit keep things interesting, and it features original new characters with well-known voice acting, but 2 characters stand out from the bunch. Scarlet, voiced by Vicar of Dibley famed Dawn French, serves as the replacement for Stephen Fry and the guide for us that still present her sense of humor, while Vex, voiced by Richard E. Grant, is a great villain that reminds me of classic Disney villains like Jafar, though admittedly his boss fights were just the same with a different trick every time I meet him, but the final slice did actually spice things up with a new scenario. After that, there were the extra levels that to beat in the main game, and unfortunately I never unlocked the final level by the time of this video. But I will say that the first 4 were challenging than previous levels. Plus, there's the Knitted Knight levels that are slightly difficult than the main game, and by the time I complete all levels, I was rewarded with a special level that combined all the Knitted Knight levels into one, and it's hard. Really hard, given that there's no checkpoints and you can only take 2 hits. Yeah, I didn't also complete this level by the time the video released. So in conclusion, I give Sackboy A Big Adventure a surprising silver medal, and I look forward to Sackboy's next big adventure in the future. Hey, that should be the title for the next sequel, don't you think? On December 27, 2020, I started playing Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, and then on February 25th, 2021, I beaten the final story mission. You know, every time I played Age of Calamity, I feel really depressed because I should have played Breath of the Wild some more. I mean, I did defeat Calamity Ganon, but there were a lot of stuff in that game that I should have discovered, along with the DLC that I didn't play, unfortunately. Anyway, I'm hoping to spend more time with its sequel, but right now, I got Age of Calamity to play, which actually takes place before Breath of the Wild, showing what Hyrule became in the main game. At least, that's what I thought at first, which I'll get to in a minute. Plus, Age of Calamity is not only a prequel to Breath of the Wild, but it's also a sequel to the original Hyrule Warriors, which is actually a spin-off to the Warriors series, and my first game in the franchise. And no, not the 1979 movie, I'm talking about Dynasty Warriors, which made other brands like Samurai and Oriachi, to other properties like Gundam, Fist of the North Star, One Piece, Berserk, Fire Emblem, and just recently Persona 5? Gee, how many more properties can they make out of this? Huh? What's that? President of Koei Tecmo said he wants to make one out of the Star Wars franchise. Well, since EA has now let go of that, there could be a possibility for that to happen, given if they can get past Disney, of course. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah. So the appealing thing about the Warriors games is that you can massacre a horde of enemies like a freaking powerhouse with a cast of characters, ranging from the quick and nimble to the slow but powerful. Oh, and let not forget the hotter characters like perfect hot mama Abosa, soaking but shy Mifa, and confident but why didn't I pick her at best girl of 2020, Impa. So each character has different combos to master, and you unlock more if certain conditions are made, but given that you can just press the same button over and over again, it gets repetitive, and it can easily board me with missions and side missions. But I do like some of the bigger enemies and bosses in the game, which had indications on which item to counter their attacks before they initiated. Plus, there are the Divine Beast sections where you can finally take control of them and plow through an army like an overpowered god, with Varmeta being my favorite for bringing death from above, while Valridania is my least favorite for not having a protective barrier. But the most disappointing thing about the game is the story, where I was expecting a Revenge of the Sith style plot, but they just added in one plot element that seemed unnecessary for a game that takes place before Breath of the Wild. I'm guessing Nintendo is not a fan of sadly ever after endings, given that the setup to Breath of the Wild did start quite sadly. But I do like what it had to tell, and how the final slice was presented, which is pretty epic and satisfying to complete. So while Age of Calamity can overstay its welcome with its repetitive combat and missions, I still enjoyed my time with this over-the-top action title where you can juggle more than 20 enemies in the air. And for that, it gets a bronze medal. And let's just hope that Star Wars Warrior title becomes a reality. On December 28, 2020, I started playing SpiderMan Miles Morales, and then on January 27, 2021, I finished the main story, with only 88% of the game completed. When I watched Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I was expecting a lot of things to come from the main character, Miles Morales, which would actually tease first in Marvel's Spider-Man for the PS4. And then 2 years later, we got Spider-Man Miles Morales, an expansion to the PS4 title which still got the same enjoyable gameplay loop of swinging through the city at full speed. But the big difference is that Miles has got powers that the original Spider-Man doesn't have, like turning invisible, which is quite handy when I'm near low on health and I can just get out of there to strike again. And then there's the non-symbiote related Venom shock powers that can be very effective when chaining in multiple enemies, particularly the final Venom move where it can restrain a single room instantly. Until I fell out all three of my bards, of course. But the true star of the show was the story, where it started with chasing Rhino through New York City, followed by humiliating a podcaster that I won't spoil, which was one of the funniest moments in the game. And then it started to reveal moments that I didn't see coming, and didn't expect to play out in different ways, right up to the final slice where it was epic, but wrapped up in a shocking conclusion. Plus, I like Miles as a character in this game, from his responsibility of being Spider-Man, to his relationship with his family, like his mother Rio and his uncle Aaron Davis, making him a real character that I can root for throughout the game. So, if you didn't guess it right now, I like Spider-Man Miles Morales. It may have got the same gameplay loop from the original, but it tells a better story than its predecessor. And with that, I gave it a gold medal. Let's just hope Gwen Stacy is a thing in this universe, if you know what I mean. On January 17, 2021, I started playing No More Heroes, and then on March 23, 2021, I finished the main story. On my first attempt at No More Heroes, I played with the Joy-Con controllers that resembled the remote nunchuck in the Wii version. But unfortunately, using the Joy-Cons today immediately reminds me that motion controls have finally gone out of style, unless you're discounting VR of course. So I decided to play with the Pro controller, which actually suits me better. That said, while I played it on the lowest difficulty, there's nothing really exciting about No More Heroes' gameplay. The attacks do have some impact, but there aren't any stylish combos from other games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. You just keep attacking them with the same strategy while waiting for an opening, and hopefully your opponent don't counter it. But the real strengths come from the story, characters, and writing, which followed Travis Touchdown, an otaku obsessor who has run out of money and is looking for a job. so he takes the role of an assassin with a beam katana that he got online. His target? 10 highly trained killers who he takes out one by one to raise up the ranks and become number one of the pack, and impress a silver-haired girl named Sylvia. What I like about the story that it doesn't take itself seriously, and it's always surprised me in humorous ways, from the second half near the plot to the final slide that had me laughing throughout the experience and going WTF all the way. Plus, the 10 assassins who you fight against are not only enjoyable, but also impressive to look at. These range from a revenge-obsessed schoolgirl named Shiboru, an over-the-top superhero actor named Destroyer Man, and a homicidal mega named Bad Girl. Though at first I was questioning the idea of raising money for the next battle by doing side missions that would lead to tedious grinding, but they make it up by doing part-time jobs like mowing the lawn, filling cars up with the right amount of gas, or petrol as we like to call it, or retrieving cats with toy foxtails. These are the most enjoyable activities I had than the assassination missions where you just kill enemies to get money, but the open world environment you enter doesn't have a lot going on really. In fact, the only mission I used his bike was the last part-time job and the final slice, which doesn't utilize his beam katana in creative ways. Also, in the Switch version that I've been playing, the sound effects are higher than the voice acting, and I found this out at the 8th boss in the game where the lasers were so loud that I couldn't understand what they are saying without subtitles, and for some bizarre reason, they can't be separated in the options menu. But that won't stop it from me giving it a medal, and with it, I give No More Heroes a silver medal. Its gameplay might not have enough toppings on, but the humor tastes like a great pepperoni. Well, messier pepperoni really. On January 26, 2021, I started playing Cyber Shadow, and then on February 14, 2021, I have beaten the final boss with only 70% of items collected. It was only a matter of time for Yacht Club Games to release a title that doesn't feature a knight with a shining shovel, or potions, or a staff, or even a spectre. But then I remember that they are the publisher of Cyber Shadow, not the developer. That credit goes to Machine Head Studios, who spent their life trying to make the game until a Twitter post of development got Yacht Club invested in publishing the project for them. And it was worth the pickup because Cyber Shadow is a tough but enjoyable side-scroller where I get new abilities that keep the experience up, power-ups that are fun to use like the swag blade that is attached to Shadow, to the orbiter that have hovering projectiles that damage enemies when they come close, a good 8-bit soundtrack that is a mixture of haunting and acceleration, and boss fights that require patience to overcome, particularly the final boss that use a lot of my movesets that I required throughout the game. Though the one big feature that every critic seemed to be ignoring is the story, because after I finished the game, I decided to look at Gaijin Jumba's latest Witch Ninja video that featured Cyber Shadow references to real-life ninjas. But instead of talking about the equipment and techniques, he talked about the story, from Dr. Projian's reasoning to the Rexu of the Master, who is on my list for Best Girl 2021, and the rival's ambition of becoming a robot, who is named the Imperator. Ooh, how intimidating. In fact, if you have beaten Cyber Shadow, I highly recommend you look at this video if you didn't understand the premise, which admittedly I didn't understand it either while we're playing it, mainly because I was trying to focus on beating this hard game, and sometimes I like it if the game reads this for me, if you know what I mean. And without spoiling a lot, the final slice was quite sad really, but I still feel some satisfaction for what I accomplished in the end. Though I do have some nitpicks, like some of the moves are frustrating to pull off, and the motorcycle section nearly killed it for me, and I haven't even played Battletoads yet. But overall, I give Cyber Shadow a gold medal for being a well put together side-scroller with an underrated story, which I'll have to admit it is pretty simple and straightforward, but it does explain what it means to be a ninja. On February 4th, 2021, I started playing Blue Fire, and then on February 27th, 2021, I gave up on it. Before the release of the game I'm going to talk about, I tried out the demo for Balan Wonderworld, and straight off the bat, the intro is spectacular that gave me the message, "Play with me, my friend." But when I start playing it, I found it to be a shallow experience where every button is one action, and the lack of challenge made me lose all hope for this game before it would release. Oh, and your character almost looked like he or she is slipping on cheesy grease while moving. Luckily though, there is an alternative. Blue Fire may not be a good looker than Balan Wonderworld, but it does a better job with its platforming. Each of my commands from a single jump, double jump, wall jump, and dashing would integrate quite well, and the void level would put those techniques to good use. However, everything else is holding it back from making me like this game. From the stale combat, with boss fights that are taken down with less tries, to the lack of a map to guide me through the game, and the arbitrary decision of paying for checkpoints to activate. Which begged me the question, is it really necessary to add in Dark Souls elements to this kind of game? And because of that, I stopped playing it when I tried to get back into it. And I would have liked it for the void levels, but I really could have the game holding my hand more through this Metroidvania / Dark Souls title. So overall, I give Blue Fire a stone medal. It may be better than Balan Wonderworld in gameplay, but maybe it should have been structured as Balan Wonderworld. Just without everything else that was holding it back, of course, if you know what I mean. On February 26, 2021, I started playing Ghosts and Goblins Red Arrested, and then on March 1st, 2021, I finished my first run. I know Ghosts and Goblins' reputation, being one of the most hardest games before Cuphead and Bloodborne came along, and I actually experienced it in a Capcom compilation on the PSP, which obviously makes me a real gamer after playing it. So I gave the new Resurrection a shot, and I first played it on the lowest difficulty, Page, but I didn't feel that satisfaction of accomplishment, given that I can just respawn on the spot. So I did a new save file with the difficulty up to Squire, and I was feeling that satisfaction of accomplishment. Each death was soul crushing, every mistake I made was my fault, and I corrected them after learning the ins and outs of each levels with interesting gimmicks, like using candles in Zone 2. Plus, the bosses are no pushovers, with attack patterns to memorize, and sneak attacks that caught me off guard that need to be less predictable to know them. In fact, the final slice was the big highlight of the game, featuring tricks and traps that kept me on my toes, followed by a final boss that ended unexpectedly with another final boss, which was satisfying to take down after dozens of attempts. Though on my first attempt, it was kinda short with my playtime lasting around 5 hours. But then comes the most infamous moment in gaming history. Ghosts and Goblins ask you to start the game all over again, and along the way, you must complete the shadow versions of previous levels you've beaten for the first time to get the better ending of the game. Even though I did mention that I got some satisfaction the first time I played it, this was the moment that killed it for me because I had to play them on shadow mode, and that is the hardest temptation I have with this. Not even saving it was helping me with it after going down the umpteenth time. So at first it was going to get a medal for being a rewarding game, but then it gets a certificate of appreciation for being too much for me to handle. It might be the most accessible game in the series, but at the end of the day, there are just some games out there that are just hard to get attached to. On March 2nd, 2021, I started playing Marquette, and then on March 17th, 2021, I finished the game. When I first laid my eyes on Marquette, I was intrigued by its concept, a first-person puzzle game where anything you place in or out of the building will change its size from the in or outside. And after playing it, it does have some head-scratching situations to solve, like using a key to open a door and then using it as a bridge. And one moment where I have to venture outside further that make me feel like an ant, even though I could have done with a sprint button really. Plus, it's a breathtaking looking game, with the use of multiple colors and bright lighting. However, by the end of Chapter 3, the puzzle would take a back seat until the final slice where it had another unique twist on the mechanic. And that's probably because the game is too focused on the story, which does a good job with the two characters' relationship, voiced by Hollywood star Seth Gabber and Bryce Dallas Howard. But without spoiling the story, it sort of becomes a walking simulator with puzzles that doesn't have to do with the model you interact with. Also, it's short, lasting around 3 to 4 hours of my playtime. which is disappointing that it didn't have more scenarios that utilized the multi-dimensional mechanic. But overall, Marquette gets a bronze medal from me, like a simple pizza with just ham and mushrooms, just without the pepperoni on it. On March 19th, 2021, I started playing Doom Eternal's DLC, The Ancient Gods Part 2, and then on March 28th, 2021, I beaten it. In part 1 of my last completed menu, I said that the Ancient Gods difficulty had too much peppers that I had enough of the BC/F difficulty, but I still think it's a good DLC and I ended up appreciating it. The same holds true with part 2, where I was introduced with new enemies like the battering rammed imps that need to be taken down with an auto shotgun blast, to the mad soldiers that have shields that can't be destroyed with a plasma rifle. So part 2 upped the difficulty, and just like part 1 that I forgot to mention, it doesn't throw any new weapons into the mix, aside from the hammer known as the Sentinel, that stun demons for a few seconds and drop ammunition, which really comes in handy. The story, meanwhile, continued where it left off from part 1, and while I won't win a medal for it, the final slice was one of the most memorable moments in the game where I wish it was the real final slice for the main game. Because while that was about shooting at a big guy, this one was more of a test of my skill and dodging timing to come out on top, and I probably suspect that it would be more challenging if I raised the difficulty up a bit more. Now then, how to wrap this up? Well, maybe the biggest mistake I made was that I should have reviewed both of these DLCs in one. But saying that though, I think part 2 is actually a better experience because it had less spirits than the first one. So I'll just give the Ancient Gods Part 2 a bronze medal, and my overall experience together a bronze as well. Now my only concern is how much more metal can they add to the franchise in the future. Okay, so that's the games I played and beaten throughout the last 3 months. What about the ones I'm still playing? Well, I am playing a recent release game, and I'm working on a top-end video on that, but I'll keep that one under lock and key until it's ready. And like I said in my Sephiroth DLC, I'll be spending more time with Pyra and Mythra in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate with my friends to get my final opinion about them. So check back with me later and I'll tell you what I think of Pyra and Mythra and all the other games I've been playing in the completed menu. And if you like what you see, be sure to like, share and subscribe to my channel. Plus stay in touch with my Twitter page, link in description down below. But until then, I'm Zacharoni. Enjoy your pizza, remember to wash your hands, and I'll see you next time.